April 17, 1955, Albert Einstein was hospitalized due to chest pain. He did not realize it at the time, but the part of the aorta, the largest vessel in his body, where it descends to his abdomen, had swollen and ruptured, and he was suffering from internal bleeding, that is, abdominal aortic aneurysm. At that time, he was giving a speech that he was going to read on television to celebrate Israel's 7th anniversary. He was busy preparing him. His doctors wanted to take him into surgery immediately, but Einstein, who had been operated on for the same reason 8 years ago, must have realized that his inheritance had been fulfilled, and he rejected it with these immortal words: "I will die whenever you want. There is no pleasure in prolonging life artificially. I have done my part. It is time to go now. He came. I will go gracefully." And indeed, in the early hours of the next day, he passed away in Plansboro Hospital. Those who watch it chaos sucked know the name of this hospital. In fact, the hospital shown in the series has nothing to do with Ditto, but the writers of the series probably chose this name on purpose. But the real interesting thing is, this happened during Einstein's autopsy. The pathologist who performed the autopsy, Thomas Harvey, cut Einstein's brain out of his body without the permission of his family, just 7 hours after the death of the great genius, and froze it by injecting 10% formalin. His aim was to examine this brain, which he believed to be unique, and discover what made him so smart. But Einstein hated being idolized, and for this reason he wanted his body to be destroyed and his ashes to be scattered secretly. In other words, Harvey had violated Einstein's will. Moreover, he removed not only his brain, but also his eyes, and gave it to Henry Abrams, Einstein's ophthalmologist. When the doctor realized that his head would burn, Einstein's son Hamza went and managed to convince him of the importance of what he was doing and get a retroactive permission. Thus, he avoided legal liability, but Hansen had one condition. His father's brain would be examined only for its calculations, and the results would be published in reputable academic journals. Harvey promised this and that. He would publish interests, and then a 35% discount only for Evolution Tree viewers. I would definitely recommend it to our young viewers or parents who want to direct their children to the software. Now let's see what this Einstein is about. The thing about his brain music, the most common mix about Einstein is the claim that even though he was so smart, his grades at school were bad like the rest of us. It's not hard to see why people want to believe this. If even Einstein was treated like a art at school, and we can be like Einstein in the future, that's partly why I made this video. Here are the things that make Einstein Einstein. If you identify correctly, you can be like him or even better than him. But if you want to be successful, first of all, you have to stop lying to yourself. Of course, school grades alone are not important, and in the sense that they can determine the future, but this means that Einstein's grades are quite good. It doesn't change the fact that he is good. How do we know this? For example, this is the report card he received in his senior year of high school on September 30, 1896, just like today. In the late 1800s, the highest grade in Switzerland was 6, and the lowest grade was 1. If you look carefully at the report card, he received a 6 in courses such as algebra, geometry, physics, and history. You can see that he got a 5 in chemistry, natural history, and German language and literature, and a 4 in drawing and geography. His lowest score was a 3 in French language and literature, which is not bad at all. Einstein was not only successful in high school. He writes a letter and says, "Yesterday, Albert received his report card. He is again at the top of his class, and his report card is excellent." Einstein was a very successful student throughout his school life. Of course, like every student, he also had points where he had disagreements with his teachers. For example, in middle school, he was called Lucky Pole at the time. One of his teachers at the gym said, "I wish Einstein wasn't my student." But the reason wasn't that Einstein was lazy or anything, it was that she sat in the back row and often smiled at what he said. Her husband thought that Einstein did not respect her, and for this reason, at one point, she got angry saying nothing would happen to you. But we cannot judge a person's entire school life by looking at such single anecdotes. We need to look at his general success and grades, and when we do this, we see that Einstein was not a failed student at all, and then why do people keep spreading this nonsense? As I said, there is something comforting in believing that Einstein was also treated as a Mao by the education system, yes, an Einstein. Like many of us, he hated the militaristic tone of the schools and the systematic approach to education. He wrote about this over and over again in his letters. But that's not all there is to it. Another potential source of the claim that Einstein's grades were bad was the grading system used in Switzerland. Einstein was transferred to the German Empire on March 14, 1879. He was born in and studied there until high school. Germany's school system is the opposite of Switzerland's, where 1 is the highest grade and 6 is the lowest grade. Therefore, their report cards before they started studying in Switzerland were always filled with 1, that is, the highest grade. But many people confuse it with the system in Switzerland. They think that this is the lowest grade. Another point that makes things even more confusing is that the high school he studied in Switzerland followed the German grading system until 1896, that is Einstein's last year at school. But later they reversed the grades. In other words, they used the system they used in the report card I just showed, only that year. They had passed and they started using 6 as the highest grade and 1 as the lowest grade. All of this fuels the confusion. But as far as we can see from his family's letters and other remaining records, Einstein's grades were always good or very good. So why did Einstein's grades in classes be so good? Or what was the reason for his genius that would shine later? Could the secret of this be in his brain? This is a question that has fascinated scientists for decades, not only Einstein, but in general. Can we specifically detect in the brain what makes geniuses geniuses? Are these geniuses born this way, or are they too focused on a certain subject? Are certain parts of their brains developing extra because they are obsessed? Can we distinguish this? We can get some clues on this subject, thanks to the decision taken hastily by the pathologist Harvey, who was fascinated by the magnitude of the genius and mystery that lay in front of him, perhaps out of his duty. After removing Harvey Einstein's brain, we can find dozens of different. He photographed it, and then, together with his mentor, Harry Ziver, he divided it into 240 pieces, each roughly 10 cubic centimeters, and prepared these pieces for microscope slides. These brain sections were determined according to the Cerebral Cortex Atlas, published by Fonoconomo and Koskinos in 1925, and the brain sections determined by Brodmann in the 19th century. The region was largely followed, meaning that the sectioned sections were chosen to correspond to groups of the brain that had special functions. But the problem was that neither Harveyan nor his mentor Zemherman had any expertise in neuroscience or the brain. They could distinguish specific pathological conditions. That is, they lacked the equipment to unravel the secrets of the extraordinary brain they had. For this reason, Harvey could never keep his promise to Hans Einstein that he would publish within a year. He could not detect anything he could publish, because he did not know what to look for, and this quickly turned into a big problem. Even though he had permission from Hans, the chief physician of the hospital believed that this was not enough to forgive him for what he had done, and he was forced to resign a few days after the incident on the grounds that he had violated ethical rules. The letter, which could not be found for a long time, was found in New Jersey and the Midwestern West, along with 2 large jars containing Einstein's brain. He immigrated to America and started working as a general physician here. Harvey was a very eccentric, even a dreamer, and for this reason, no academics took him seriously. For 30 years after Einstein's death, he could not persuade anyone to examine Einstein's brain. Finally, he traveled all over America. He wanted to give the brain to Einstein's grandchild, who lives in California, but his grandson also refused to receive this brain, so Einstein's brain turned into a curse. After all these events and going back and forth with the brain for a long time, he finally returned to where he started. He returned and delivered the jars containing the brain pieces to the pathologist hired in his position, and his 40-year adventure ended. From that point on, researchers began to show some more information about Einstein's brain. The first research on Einstein's brain took place in 1 year. That is, exactly 44 years after Einstein died. After it was published, he examined the remains of his brain and the original photographs, and the findings obtained so far are quite interesting. First of all, Einstein's brain is not larger than average. On the contrary, it is quite small. The brain of a man of the age and weight at which Einstein died should be around 1,400 grams. It was only 130 grams. As you may remember from our video on animal intelligence, when it comes to the brain, there is no rule such as the bigger, the better. For example, a brain may be relatively small, but full of tighter neural connections, and therefore its processing capacity may be higher, but Einstein's brain is beyond that. Variations have been detected, and let me show you a few of them directly. Look, this is the brain of an average person. This is your frontal cortex, that is the front part of your brain. This is the right hemisphere. This is the left hemisphere. This is the gap between the two brain hemispheres, which we call the longitudinal fissure, and inside it is the connection called corpus wireless. If you pay attention to the slit that houses the bridge, there are roughly 3 lines, that is 3 turnovers, in this front part of the brain. 1, 2, 3. Now let's look at one of the photographs of Einstein's brain taken by Harvey. We are looking at it from the same angle. Pay attention to the gap separating the two hemispheres. Here, let's count these main lines again. 1, 2, 3, 4. There seems to be one extra Danius in 10. This excess is right frontal. So, you are not surprised at all about our non-verbal math-like abilities, are you? This is a region called mother knot, which we can translate into Turkish as hand motor mallet, or simply the omega sign due to its similarity to the Greek letter omega. This is responsible for the agile movements of our hands and fingers. We know from previous studies that people who started playing the violin between the ages of 6 and 14 have this type of mallet in their brains. Just by looking at this brain, we can say that Einstein played the violin with his right hand, and that he started doing this before the age of 14. Indeed, Einstein started playing the violin at the age of 6 with the guidance of his pianist mother, and he gave up the violin throughout his life. Let's take a look at a new photo. Here we see Einstein's left brain from the front. The fess that divides the brain into two is here again. Even if you don't know anything about the brain, do you see anything abnormal within the framework of what you have seen so far? Music. Can you take a look in front of it? In a normal person, the same structure should be like the others. This is the motor cortex of the brain. This is the motor cortex of the brain. This controls our voluntary functions, such as hand movements. Another finding, which I cannot show with a photograph, was reached by counting the nerve cells in Einstein's brain sections one by one under the microscope. And it was determined that the number of neurons in Brodmann area number 39, located on the left side of the brain, was less than a normal person. This region is related to the inability to understand words and language perception, and is indeed Einstein could not speak fluently until he was 6 years old. And for a long time he suffered from dyslexia-like problems, such as not being able to write down thoughts, not being able to remember words, not being able to read aloud. That is, Einstein did not learn to read at the age of 2, and started to think about abstract mathematics at the age of 4, like some other times. I will come back to this in a moment. By the way, let me tell you that the most obvious differences in Einstein's brain are the sections related to motor functions and senses in an interesting way. In fact, this explains very well another fact we know about Einstein. Einstein was not someone who wrote or thought with words. In fact, most people, had an inner mind that thought with words. Einstein was laughing when he was told that he had a voice. He was thinking more with colors and music. In other words, he was a synesthete. If you want to test yourself for synesthesia, I recommend you to watch our video on this subject. For example, when Einstein got stuck on a problem, instead of sitting and doing calculations, he would sometimes play the violin for hours, and suddenly he would stop and say, "Oh, I found it," and then he put what was in his mind into mathematics. Moreover, Einstein's way of perceiving the universe was quite extraordinary. While Einstein was thinking about the universe, instead of drawing strength from mathematics or experiments as other physicists did, he drew strength from aesthetics. The person who explained this best is another great physicist, saying, "Einstein has a theory that is compatible with observation." However, many people do this. Einstein approached the subject very differently. He tried to think about whether I would create this part of the universe like this if I were God, and depending on his answer, he decided whether he liked a theory or not. This is a very interesting philosophy of life that draws its strength from aesthetics and Einstein. This aesthetic perception guided him a lot while he was developing the theory of relativity, especially the theory of special relativity, which states that space-time is parts of the same fabric, but at the same time, while he was trying to develop the theory of general relativity, which generalizes this theory, it took about 2 years for him to discover this aesthetic approach. Because he preferred the more aesthetic to the more mathematical, he constantly went down the wrong path. Finally, when he put his perception aside and surrendered to the flow of mathematics, he was able to develop the general theory of relativity, which explains the interaction of mass with the space-time fabric. When he saw the success that this change of perspective brought him, he spent the rest of his life in a pure mathematical path, away from aesthetics. He built it with perception, and this obviously resulted in him being relatively less productive in the second half of his life. Moreover, since he built the theory of relativity on classical physics, he could never get used to quantum mechanics, which destroyed classical physics throughout his life, and this made him make many mistakes. These are the subject of other videos. Very started thinking about these issues only when he was 5 years old. It starts about 10 years later. On the other hand, we still know very little about the impact of our experiences in later ages on brain folds and macroanatomy. Therefore, in the light of current data, we can say that Einstein was most likely born with at least a significant part of these variations in the brain. Historians agree that the main factors that make Einstein Einstein are his environment and what happened in his life. Since that is our subject here, we focused on Einstein's brain and never looked at what he went through in his life and the events that shaped his character and way of thinking. But I can say this from where Einstein sits, thanks only to his innate abilities. For example, the learning difficulties he suffered in his childhood probably forced him to think and learn in different and new ways. Moreover, Einstein knew how to set his mind on certain problems and pursue them doggedly, even while working in a patent office to gain financial independence. He thought about problems related to physics and became one of the most respected in his field. He never stopped following the work of his academics. Thanks to his hard work, determination, he was able to turn his talent into a product. Otherwise, no one can discover the secrets of the universe from where they sit. As research after research shows, in many cases, genius is not only about genes, only about brain anatomy, only about work, not only about luck, not only about socioeconomic situations, not only about the environment, but all of these. It is related to different amounts in different situations, and yes, maybe Einstein was able to turn some things to his advantage more easily thanks to the genes or brain he was born with, or maybe you were not born with a brain like Einstein, or your school grades may be worse than Einstein's. It is not possible to change this anymore, but there are things you can change. There are, and many people almost never use the things that are under their control, such as the power of the neuroplasty site, or the ability to put themselves in positions that can lead to success. By not doing these things, my brain is not like Einstein. That is why I did not become a genius. His defense is a bit futile. Frankly, in the following videos, you will see how only pure interest and correct guidance can transform you. I will give examples, but lastly, let me just say this. The next time you learn something new or drink and think deeply about a subject, do not think that you are just acquiring new information, but also imagine that the connections in your brain are physically changing and transforming. It will increase the pleasure you get from this subject. Try it and you will see next time. Goodbye. See you in the video.